Greetings everybody, my name is Tommy the Keyblade Master and welcome to my channel. Last year I reviewed a game for the NES that is one of my favorite called DuckTales. Now I didn't play DuckTales as a kid, I waited until I was around 25 before I was able to get my hands on a copy and play through it. But the game seemed almost ageless when I played it, even though I was playing it in the high definition era, it seemed almost perfect. So I was excited, along with a whole bunch of old school DuckTales fans, to see that this game was getting a remastered. And I remember picking it up and playing it, and kind of enjoying it enough to have given it to my brothers as a Christmas present when they got a physical release, as well as to a pen pal who is a really good friend of mine. But I'll have to be honest with you, DuckTales Remastered is not as good as the NES game, and I'll get into it in my review, but I can point to the core reason for all these flaws, and it was the $15 price point. So remember, when I start talking about the flaws in this game, it comes from the $15 price point and some of the things they did to correct for that, and I'll explain that later in my review, especially when I start talking about the gameplay and some of the story elements. Without further ado, let's start talking about DuckTales Remastered. Alright, let's talk about the story and the narrative. Ironically, I just did a video in response to something called Alloy 7's Gamer Life about how a good narrative can help a game story while a bad narrative can really weigh it down. DuckTales is a bit of a mixed bag in this category. Now, in the original NES DuckTales, there was no real narrative in the game. You just assume Scrooge was out to find treasure because he's Scrooge McDuck, and that's what Scrooge McDuck does. He likes to make money and find treasure. That's always been his M.O. In this one, they tried to play it out like an episode of the cartoon show. What does that mean? Prepare for a lot more extra dialogue, especially in stages. Now, I'm not saying that this dialogue is bad on its own. In fact, some of it can be pretty amusing. I enjoyed the conversations between Scrooge McDuck and Launchpad in the Amazon jungle stage whenever I found a coin, and you gotta find a bunch of them in the stage in order to unlock the next area. Yeah, I'll explain that more in the gameplay section and my gripes there. However, after a while these get tedious, and if you're planning on replaying the game, and DuckTales is a game that just screams to be replayed, these scenes get old fast, and they also screw up the flow of the game. It's not like they're really needed. Now, on the good news front, trying to make it look like it's an episode of the cartoon show, they brought back a whole bunch of the voice actors. You got the original voice actor for Scrooge McDuck, and you also got the original voice actor for Magica Dispel. Both of them are in their 90s when they recorded this, and they both hit it out of the park.
You sneaky, conniving...
Please, save compliments for garden parts.
Sure, Alan Young's voice has aged quite a bit since he did Scrooge McDuck in the 80s, and it's softened. However, he still hits it out of the park in this role, even at the age of 95, I do believe, when he recorded this. He does an excellent job, and his role as Scrooge McDuck is one of my favorite parts about this game. However, like I said, the slower narrative really does weigh it down. If you want to know what it's about, basically Scrooge McDuck finds the bunch of treasures on a map in the back of an old painting after the Beagle Boys tried to steal it, and now he's after all the loot so he can become the richest duck in the world. And then, of course, towards the end of the game, rather than have the treasures all fly off, you also have a reason for him to go out and try to kill Dracula Duck. Like I said, the narrative's like the old cartoon show, but I wish WayForward and Disney had thought that this was a remake of an old game and took that more into consideration, because the narrative does, unfortunately, slow this game down unnecessarily, and that is a negative. There is only one word to describe the way DuckTales Remastered looks in HD, and that word is beautiful. Disney and WayForward actually called in some of their old animators to redo the backgrounds and to do some of the character sprites. What we get is a game that looks just like an episode of the cartoon show, and that cartoon show has held up amazingly over the last 25 years, so this game just looks amazing in HD. The way the sprites look, even some of the enemy animation and death animation are humorous and really fit the character of the show. I have no real complaints when it comes to the graphics updates. WayForward did a really great job being true to the original NES game as well as being true to the original cartoon show. But what about the music in this game? DuckTales is known for having some of the best 8-bit soundtracks in a video game of that time. So how is the remastered version? Well, my mind was put to ease when I heard the opening theme song playing. It starts off with an 8-bit rendition of the original DuckTales theme, just like we got on the NES, but then quickly starts putting in newer instruments and starting to sound newer, and that's a good description of the rest of the music in this game too. It sounds pretty good, and it's faithful to the original. Here's the opening theme. And if you're worried about your moon theme, it also sounds pretty excellent. Yeah, there's nothing to really complain about in the music section either. WayForward knocked it out of the park with its music remixes of the original game, and they even have the option to switch to the 8-bit music if that suits your fancy. Now let's move on to something that people do complain about, and that's the changes in the gameplay. Let's talk about the gameplay elements in DuckTales Remastered, and why some people who are fans of the classic game don't really like this new remastered gameplay, and I'll get to it in a minute, but I can think most of the problems can be summed up by that $15 price point WayForward attached to it. In order to have that glorious backgrounds and beautiful animation and some of that great remix music, WayForward knew it would have to charge a hefty price for it, $15. The only problem is the original NES game can be beaten in less than an hour by a noob like me who does not play it religiously. Those who do play it religiously and like to speedrun the game have bragged that they can get it around 10 minutes, and I believe them. So in order to get that full $15, WayForward had to pad, and I'll get to that in a minute. But first, let's start talking about the good parts of DuckTales Remastered. And that is the fact that it's still DuckTales at its core. You're still going to be pogo sticking on enemies. You're still going to be opening treasure chests and finding diamonds. That part has not changed, and the controls are still really good. In fact, I would say just a little bit better in this one because WayForward made them simpler by just having one button to press in order to pogo stick, and I enjoyed the simplicity that WayForward added to it with the change in the controls. Another thing they added new to this game is the gallery segment. Now you can spend all that money and diamonds you have found in the stages on new artwork and soundtracks, as well as jump into Scrooge's money bin. I enjoyed this new feature. Also added into this game are 2 new stages. There's an intro tutorial stage. It's okay, nothing memorable, but it's not terrible, and a Mount Vesuvius stage, which replaces Transylvania as the last stage. Rather than redoing Transylvania again to fight Dracula Duck, you now go through a new stage that's called Mount Vesuvius. It's kind of hard. It doesn't exactly stack up to the rest of the stages, but WayForward did a good job in at least trying to create a new stage, and for the most part I enjoyed it. I also enjoyed what WayForward did to the bosses. They're now more complex, have more complex patterns, they take a little longer, and overall I found them more enjoyable. So what didn't I like about DuckTales Remastered? Well, it's time to talk about the padding. All the problems in DuckTales Remastered can be attributed to one thing, and that's its padding. In order to make the game feel longer and that players got their $15, WayForward did a few things to make the game feel longer. In the original DuckTales NES game, to beat the first stage, all you had to do was go past the first part and then up the vine, and the rest of the stage was linear. In Remastered, in order to get into the temple now, you have to find 6 coins, meaning you're going to have to explore the tunnels that exist below the first area, whether you want to or not. This is a speedrunner's nightmare, but to make matters worse, those story elements that really make the game drag really come into full force here, because each one of these coins you have to find in order to unlock the temple come with a cutscene of a conversation between Scrooge McDuck and Launchpad, making the stage just kind of feel dragged out compared to the breezy one of the original. And it's not just the Amazon. Transylvania is another stage where this happens. In the original, just find the right magic mirror and you're on to Magica Dispel. In this one, you have to rescue Huey, Dewey, and Louie from the Beagle Boys and collect the runes they have in order for the mirror to work so you can get to Magica. This makes the game feel tedious and longer than it should. But I think newer players probably won't feel this as much as the classic gamer who's used to playing DuckTales the way it should have been played on the NES. My thoughts is none of this padding is necessarily terrible on its own. The story elements in it are good, but I wish they had given us a classic mode that would have unlocked after I'd beaten this new arranged mode. I call it the George Lucas rule. You want to switch out the actor who plays Anakin Skywalker on your new releases of The Return of the Jedi? That's fine, but either as a bonus feature or a separate set, give me the ability to go back and watch the original ones redone in HD. That's the problem with DuckTales Remastered. They needed to have added in a classic mode. Keep the new graphics and soundtrack, but let me play DuckTales like it was on the NES without the extra padding. If they had done that and given us the option, I think a lot less people would be complaining about some of the game's tediousness in this new Remastered. I enjoyed it, my brothers enjoyed it, hopefully my pen pal enjoyed it, but I can't say it's as good as the NES version. I gave the NES version a perfect score, I do believe. DuckTales Remastered gets a 4 out of 5, 1 point less than the original NES game, but it's still a fun game to play. I suggest seeking it out. If you can find it on sale, even better. Well, that's all for this review. If you have any comments about DuckTales Remastered, feel free to leave them down below. I will also post a thumbnail if you're interested in seeing my original review of DuckTales for the NES. This is Tommy the Keyblade Master, thanking you for watching and signing out.